This is AIM Agenda. With me now, Tim Wilson and Peter Khalil. Tim, to you, Happy New Year to both of you, and our first chat for the year. Absolutely. Tim, your response to what Jim Chalmers had to say in relation to the company tax cuts, what do you say that his argument basically that CEOs would say that, wouldn't they?
Well, this just shows the economic illiteracy of the modern Labor Party, because if you want to create jobs, we need to reform tax. If we want to deal with wage growth and increase the amount of money in people's household in their pay packets, we need to reform tax. If we want to deal with lots of issues affecting the country, we need to reform tax. But critically, the CEOs today have belled the toll and actually made it quite clear that if you want to create jobs in the Australian economy, give young people the first opportunity they need to get into the job market, you need to cut tax, and that's exactly what this government is focused on doing, getting Australians into jobs.
And you look at what the Qantas chief said, Peter Khalil. Alan Joyce says it would open up new routes, they'd purchase more aircraft and will have to employ additional staff along the way as well. That'd all be good for the economy. Do you deny there'd be any sort of economic boost from such a move if it was across the board?
Look, you know, there's no doubt that Qantas would have a number of benefits from tax cuts. No one's disputing that. It's a question of priorities. I think, as Jim was talking about, Kieran, it's about what priorities a government should be focusing on. And if you look at
growth, that's a pretty good priority.
Geez, it lasted 10 seconds in 2018 before I got interrupted. If you're talking about social transfer through the taxation system to education, healthcare, infrastructure, these things are demonstrated to actually benefit the economy into the long term and society in the long term. And we just don't think giving $65 billion to the top end of the town in the big business and multinationals will do that as effectively as investing in education and healthcare. And we are supporting, by the way, tax cuts to small businesses with a turnover up to $2 million, which is about 80 or more than 80% of small businesses in Australia.
But they're not the big employers, are they? In fact, the big employers are upwards of that, the medium-tier firms as well. You'd have to compromise, surely, in terms of beyond the $2 million turnover. That doesn't take much to hit that mark.
Yeah, but we're also supporting tax cuts to up to $10 million, up to $25 million, down to 27.5%. It's about getting the balance right on this, I think, and I think Jim's got it right. I think Chris Bowen's got it right. They've got their priorities straight. There is a lot of inequality, growing inequality within our society and across the Western world, and it's about getting that balance right in the way that government prioritises where it spends taxpayer dollars. And we just don't think giving a tax cut to multinationals and big business is the best way to do it. We just don't believe in and the evidence doesn't demonstrate that trickle-down economics works. As Jim said, there's a lot of other factors to economic growth.
Kieran, can we just start
Tim
by
Wilson,
saying...
and they're right to point out that the global economy is... Sorry, Tim. Jim Chalmers also pointed out that the global economy is the strongest it's been for a number of years. So that is one of the, obviously, the key factors that Mr Trump has inherited as well. So it'd be wrong to simply say Trump tax cuts, therefore this stronger economic outlook for the US.
Well, yes, that's part of it. Global economy is doing better than it has been for many years, but the repatriation of billions of dollars of US companies, of their capital back into the United States to create jobs is clearly and directly a correlation to the Trump tax cuts. But let's go back to the point Peter made before. This is about priorities. If you actually want sustainable policy in this country, you actually want people in jobs. The greatest gap that exists in society today is not between inequality between people who are working, it's between people who are working and who aren't working. And the focus of this policy, the focus of these company tax, as the CEOs have made very clear today, is if you cut the company tax rate, what they'll be able to do is hire new people, create new jobs and address the very economic inequality that Peter says is important. And that's exactly why we're focusing on what we are, to try and get more Australians in jobs. We're creating 1,000 new jobs a day. We have a record number of job growth under the Turnbull government. And what we want to do is keep building on that success. And what we have from the Labor Party is to stymie and limit that capacity for Australians to get into jobs.
Peter Khalil, let's look at a couple of other issues. Sorry, we're going to move on. David Feeney, yeah. I want to ask you about him, and his outlook is not great. It's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars as well in terms of the legal hearings before the High Court across the board. Why shouldn't he just go to a by-election, be done with it? He says he's got evidence, hasn't been able to provide it. Move on.
Well, I think David Feeney did the right thing by referring himself. I mean, we've got a thorough process in the Labor Party which everyone went through, and except David, by his own...
Except David.
Again, don't interrupt me, Tim. Except David, by his own admission, didn't go through that thorough process in the best possible way, and he's referred himself as a result of that, and he's done the right thing on that. I'm not going to preempt the High Court like the Prime Minister and tell them, the justices, what they're going to find either way. It has to go through that process.
Tim Wilson, that's fair enough, given that's the way it happened previously.
Let's get real. I mean, what we know is that they have such a thorough process that David Feeney happened to just like a whole person happened to just completely slip through the system. Meanwhile, we have other issues with MPs up in Queensland. We could have a series of by-elections where, let's concede it, Labor might lose those by-elections either to the Greens or the Liberal Party. The Greens in Batman and the Liberal Party in Longman, and they're just trying to prolong and delay and hope they can get out of it, rather than doing what responsible members of Parliament do, like Barnaby Joyce, who actually, as soon as he found out and there was clarity in his situation, he resigned. The same with John Alexander. Clarity in the situation, resigned. At the moment, David Feeney is relying on the dog eating his homework, or him never actually having done the homework and hoping that he can get away with an excuse. It's ridiculous. He should resign, take the honourable step, put his constituents first, and then deal with it so we can actually resolve this issue and move on.
I really tried. I had a New Year resolution not to bicker with Tim and to try and come to some bipartisan agreement on things. And look, the point is, mate, he did the right thing and he referred himself. And I think people are sick and tired of this whole saga. And we tried to vote last year to put a whole bunch of people to the High Court, and you voted against it. I mean,
we voted against
Peter,
it.
I think you need to do a bit more work on your. You need to do a bit more work on your New Year's resolution, Peter. You're not off to a great start. Let's just finish. Tim Wilson, finally, on electric cars. I want to get your thoughts, particularly on this. We heard from Jim with a Labor perspective, but Tim, your thoughts on electric cars. Josh Frydenberg wrote an op-ed over the New Year period in support of that industry. Craig Kelly, John Wacker-Williams, a few of the Conservative members of the coalition, not so impressed with that idea. What are your thoughts on that as an industry, just as Sanjeev Gupta, that billionaire who saved Whyalla, is talking about manufacturing electric cars at the Holden plant in Adelaide?
I'm a big supporter of technology, and if somebody wants to come and invest money and create jobs in Australia, and that would help, it would be helped if we actually got our company tax cut through, then that would be fantastic. And if it's electric vehicles, more the power to them, because you know, technology is going to make the future awesome. But I don't believe in subsidies. The government isn't arguing for massive subsidies to underlie the profits of multinational companies. We want business to stand on its own 2 feet, particularly in an area as disruptive as electric cars, where we're at different stages of technological innovation, and we shouldn't be backing winners when we're not even sure that they're going to go to market in the way that we want.
Tim Wilson, Peter Quill, great to see you both. And we'll talk to you many times throughout the